Hi, this is Jorge from KETIV Technologies. In this session of KETIV's Autodesk Virtual Academy, we will look at how to get started with Autodesk Showcase, a live visualization tool that allows you to create photorealistic images. Just a quick reminder that you can subscribe to AVA by going to ketiv.com/AVA and register for our year-round learning sessions Thursdays at 10 a.m. You can also keep visiting this YouTube KETIV playlist that we have for you as well, of course. The goal of today's is to look at going from Inventor to Showcase, how we can get started, how we can use the suite workflows inside of there so you can create your own photorealistic images. So we do this by not having to click a render button necessarily, but instead we get to see exactly what it's going to look like before we actually save it out as an image. The first thing we'll do inside of Inventor here, let's go over to the browser where we'll notice there's a representations folder. In here you'll find view representations. These allow us to control different visibility states inside of Inventor. This could be the visibility of a part, it could be the color override of a part, it could be camera angles as well. So we can do this inside of Inventor and leverage it when we go to our suite workflow here. There's three different options we have for Showcase. The first one is a conceptual model, self-explanatory, it's a low detail model. The next one is constraint animations, which actually takes your constraints and creates animations out of them. The last one is the realistic one. This was the one we're going to use to show high detail. At least that's the way we'll start setting this up. The first thing you'll want to do is go to the settings and you want to apply what type of settings you want, such as, is this a large assembly, is this a small assembly, so that the tessellation here will look a lot better and it can apply the materials and the textures a little bit better. The next one is the visual style. So we have different visual styles that we can pick from here. It went ahead and grabbed the one I'm using inside of Inventor, but we can override this and change it to be able to adjust what's going to look like in Showcase. The other option here I like to mention is we have a checkbox here where we can have it match the lighting that's inside of Inventor with an environment that's already predefined inside of Showcase for us. Finally, once you've selected those options, you go ahead and hit the Run option, which will automatically export this model for you and put it right inside of Showcase with the right units, all the parts in place for this model. Now the first thing I'm going to show you here is how can you rotate this model, and that's by using the shortcut commands on your keyboard. I like to use Shift and Alt to do this, which allows you to just start spinning this around. You can use the different wheels on your mouse to do this, so the panning will happen with the wheel on your mouse. And then if you want to rotate, you actually use the left click on your mouse to do that. Again, that's by holding down the Shift and Alt key, but you do always have the view cube up at the right hand corner, and you have the control panel on the right hand side for zooming purposes and rotating purposes as well. The first thing we'll look at here is alternative lineups. So by hitting A on the keyboard, I'm able to bring up these view representations that were created inside of Inventor. For example, you're seeing here that we're able to bring up that view representation where it turns off the visibility of different components. So this is essentially what we call a material lineup inside the alternatives. The next one down is color overrides. So this one allows us to look at different colors depending on which box we're selecting on here, which were appearances that were created again inside of Inventor. Now let's say we wanted to apply our own material. The way to do that is you select the object you want to change this to, and then you hit the M on your keyboard to start the material control panel. In the materials, you'll notice there's a lot of different ones, and there's some specific Showcase ones here that sometimes might look a little bit nicer or might fit the need that you're looking for. In this case here, this one has a texture to it that I wanted to see, which is great, but maybe I want to adjust it a little bit. We can do that by right clicking and going to the material properties. Inside the material properties, we have a slew of different options. First, maybe the color. Maybe you want to adjust the shading of the gray here to be a little more realistic, to look like the part that you actually have. Maybe you decide you don't want it to be reflective at all, or maybe just a little bit, or maybe a lot. If we scroll down at the bottom, you'll see the different options that we have, such as bump, which is really the texture for this. You can download texture images and load them into here if you wanted to. And then finally, we can auto fit this so that we can actually see the texture according to the part size. You'll notice we can create different alternatives as well. You're not limited to just the ones that were created. I can choose a material lineup, for example. What this allows me to do is to add a new alternative of these objects. The first thing you need to do is select the objects, and then once you add the new alternative, you add the selection to this specific alternative. We set the image, and then we can create a brand new one. Once we've created the new one, you have to go back and select the object that you want to change the material, and with that object still selected, you right click it and you set the image and add the selection to this alternative. Now this allows you to toggle back and forth between the two. You can turn off the shortcuts here, the alternatives and the materials, by just selecting M or A on our keyboard. And now we're bringing up the environments, which is the E on our keyboard. This allows you to very quickly select a different environment, and it changes the actual 3D environment for you. You could rotate this around and you have a full 3D environment. This also has its own lighting and shading inside of it already built in, so you don't have to play around with that. One of the things that sometimes happens though is sometimes your part's not in the right place, so you have the opportunity here to change the floor position. Maybe you wanted to move it up, maybe you want to move it down. A lot of times you just want to put it at the bottom of the model, so that's exactly what this will allow you to do. Now if we go over to the appearance pull down, we'll go to ambient shadows. And what this allows us to do is to select the components and choose what type of quality we want for ambient shadows. You'll notice here we have choose every object that's not baked, and we simply hit the bake option. So what ambient shadows is going to do is look at all the shadows of all the parts and make sure that it's all being casted correctly. So there'll be shadows on the actual different components of the other components. So it gives you a much more realistic view of this. This part could take a little bit longer depending on your hardware resources. So you might have to choose this at the very end, right before you actually start publishing your image, by the way. If I zoom in here, we can certainly start to see a little more shadow definition right inside of here of these parts being casted on top of each other. Now the other thing we can do is we also have other options where we can change the camera properties, for example. This can allow you to change if it's concave or convex, for example, lens that is, what type of distance you actually want from the focal point of the actual model. You have a slew of different options to choose from right here, as well as the actual camera position, instead of just using the wheel on your mouse or the view cube to be able to adjust the rotation of this part. Now we're going to turn on shots. The shortcut for that is T. What this will do is, first of all, it takes again the view reps that were created to create the different camera angles. These are just still images, so it's a kind of a quick way to get to these different camera angles that we're seeing here. You notice it doesn't work with the alternatives necessarily to turn off and on visibility. It's just camera angles. Therefore, we can create our own, where we can create cinematic, we can create stills from this as well. In the cinematic ones, we have a few different options. Right now, we'll look at the zoom in option. In the zoom in option here, you'll notice I can change the duration of this by either selecting on the little arrows, or I can type it in as well myself. There's other options here where I can still change this where it doesn't have to be a zoom in. It could be a track left or a track right, for example. We can reset our start whenever we need to as well, and we can come in here and move this around, and it'll still remember that, of course. So you'll notice right now I'll just go ahead and rotate this just a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and preview this so we can see exactly what it's going to look like. With our shots done, we'll look at behaviors now. And what behaviors are is the ability to set up different animations. This is where you'll notice that we have the constraint animations that we can do, keyframe animation. We can also do a turntable animation. These are just kind of quick shortcuts to be able to do these things here. And we can then use this control panel here to tell it exactly what it is we want to do. How we want it to rotate, how fast, what parts we want it to do it with. So the first thing we need to do is actually select the components and choose those components to be a part of this turntable animation. For that matter, you'll notice really you can do this with just some parts and not all of them necessarily. It's really up to you. We'll turn these off. You don't have to use the shortcut commands to turn them off necessarily. And now let's look at publishing these images. You can publish images, you can publish movies, which will actually allow you to publish all those shots into one thing. So it could be kind of like a timeline, if you will, of what you want it to look like. Before we actually jump into that, let's do one more thing, and that's enable ray tracing. What ray tracing does is it looks at the reflection of the parts on top of each other. So by hitting R on a keyboard, we're able to enable the ray tracing tool, which again, depending on your hardware resources, can take some time. You'll notice here that as I clicked on it, it does take some time. It's going through the different render levels to see exactly, at what point do I, is this exactly what I want. We have settings in here that we can change as well if we wanted to make it look a lot better. Once you've established your ray tracing levels that you want, then you want to come in here and publish an image. You have different ways to publish the image, different file types, resolution. You can type those in for yourself as well as the image size that you'd like. Down at the bottom, you'll see this is where we can insert how many render levels we actually want to use in here as well. And don't forget to change this to locally only if you only want to save this locally and not necessarily on the web. There are a few other options here. We can always toggle to movie from here as well. I'll post it to YouTube if you want to, even a web presentation as well. Let's go ahead and publish this image now. We can give it any name we want. We can still change the save file type at the bottom from JPEG, for example, to something else if we wanted to. And let's take a look at what this will actually look like in the end. So here's a photorealistic image. And this is just a quick one that we created from this right here. The running the saving of the file could take just a little bit longer, of course, depending on your hardware resources. And this is just the beginning, right? Of course, we can come in here, modify the materials of the muffler, for example, the piping as well, maybe do some stainless steel or different colors and so forth. But all things available to you. There is a lot more inside of Showcase. If you go to the YouTube channel we have, you can just type in KETIV Showcase actually in YouTube, and you'll see a lot of different videos that we've created over the past few years that will give you specifics about what you might be looking for. In summary, we looked at the suite workflows that comes with the product design suite, where you can very easily go to the application menu and start to push those files or those parts and assemblies forward to Showcase. We can leverage view representations inside of there, and turn on ambient shadows, and ray tracing is a big key part of this to make sure it looks more realistic. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining in this session. Don't forget to visit our different social media sites. We'll keep giving you more updates. Thank you.